So I'm going to get to talking about the Tudor Black Bay Ceramic, but first I want to talk a little bit about Formula 1 and teammates. Well, normally most teams have a number 1 driver and a number 2 driver. You know, you have your Rubens Barrichellos, your Felipe Massas, your Mark Webbers. Essentially, they serve to support the number 1. And a lot of the times, what they'll do is they'll use the number 2 driver to force some sort of error or put some pressure on your direct rival. So what does this have to do with watches? Well, it looks like Rolex is using its number 2 brand, Tudor, to put a bit of pressure on Omega. Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are talking about the new Tudor Black Bay Ceramic. Now this watch represents a huge move for Tudor despite the fact that it looks strikingly familiar. That's because in 2019 we saw basically this same watch as the Only Watch. Only Watch is an annual event in which watch manufacturers create one-off pieces to then sell, and the proceeds go to help with muscular dystrophy. And for 2019, Tudor released basically the same thing as what we've just seen now. A full ceramic Black Bay, including black ceramic bezel and case, and an open caseback. However, that particular watch, which is a piece unique and sold for 350,000 francs, didn't really have any changes to the movement apart from the fact that it was actually visible, which at that point was pretty new for Tudor. This new version though, it's something else. On the outside, they look extremely similar. The main differences are that instead of the full blackout lume, it's got regular lume, albeit it looks a little bit aged. And the movement also aesthetically has a fully blacked out look in terms of the bridges and the rotor. And it's also got an interesting pattern on it, which actually differentiates from the normal MT5602. But the biggest difference when it comes to this particular movement, which is known as the MT5602-1U, is that this is METAS certified. Now if that sounds familiar, that's the certification that Omega introduced in 2015 with the Globemaster. So what METAS certification does, the biggest differentiation from COSC or superlative chronometer, for example, that Rolex uses, is the focus on anti-magnetism. These watches are tested to be resistant up to 15,000 Gauss, which is a lot of Gauss. But not only that, where it differs from something like COSC is also the fact that it's a cased movement setup. So what they do is they test it for essentially all of the things that they claim it to be. So they test the water resistance to make sure it's actually 200 meters as per the ISO standards. They test to make sure that the power reserve is actually the 70 hours that they declare that it is. And they also test it for accuracy. But instead of the COSC, which has 6 seconds of deviation and tested in 5 positions, this is tested in 6 positions and to only 5 seconds of deviation, specifically 0 to plus 5 seconds a day. So extremely accurate. Now originally this was only with Omega, however it wasn't their own actual thing, they were just the first ones to adopt this new standard. It's still an objective standard that's conducted by an outside body, the Swiss Institute of Metrology, however it is conducted at the factory on cased up watches. And bringing it back to the Formula 1 analogy, this watch with its METAS certification, with a full ceramic case and bezel, and a see-through caseback is only $4,750 US. So this is Rolex using its number 2 brand, Tudor, to put a bit of pressure on Omega, because Omega makes an extremely similar watch. And that is of course the Seamaster 300M in ceramic and with the titanium bezel. Now that's an $8,100 watch, which was released in 2019, and all of the specs are very similar. It's 300 meters water resistant, so fine, a little bit better on that front. But it's a full ceramic case, has a ceramic bezel insert, the bezel itself though is titanium, rubber strap, and METAS certification on a 3-hander. In terms of thickness, they're both very similar, however the Omega is a little bit bigger at 43.5 millimeters in diameter, but even looking at its pre-owned value, 5,600 to about 8,600 US, this still manages to be more expensive than the Tudor, which seems to match it and actually surpass it in terms of the power reserve. It matches it on nearly everything else. The only real thing it's missing is, of course, the Omega has the coaxial. But even then, these are extremely closely matched, and the Omega definitely isn't twice the watch. So why is it twice as expensive? I don't know if this is going to be something that makes Tudor a lot of money. It might move a lot of units. But if this is something that pushes towards the rest of Tudor, this is going to put a lot of pressure on Omega. Because Rolex can't really change very much, because it's going to fuck with their formula. At the end of the day, they know that they win by doing their little evolution instead of revolution, not making big changes, all that sort of thing. So their way of putting pressure on competitors, and even to a degree maybe distracting their competitors, is by using Tudor to put the pressure on them. Now Omega has to scramble and say, do we need to review our value proposition? Will this make them lose sleep overnight? Probably not. You know, Omega in general is positioned higher than Tudor in terms of brand positioning. Tudor has been the best value brand in Swiss watchmaking for quite a few years now. So Omega doesn't necessarily directly compete with them. But what it means is that it takes away a little bit of Omega's edge over Rolex, because Omega is always the one who's more technologically advanced and pushing the limits in terms of movements, in terms of showing the movements, decoration, materials, etc., versus Rolex, which stays sort of tried and true. So more than anything, it means now Omega has to fight a little bit of a two-front war, because Tudor is undercutting them on price and still providing the same, if not better, value when it comes to the actual technology used. Between the two, it's difficult to pick which one I would actually get if it was my own money, purely because, you know, I've owned a Tudor and I've owned an Omega. I still own my Omega. And that tells you all there is to know, is that I might be a little bit biased. I maybe just like Omega as a brand more. I personally like the design of the Seamaster more than the Black Bay, though the Black Bay is a very good looking watch. So it'd be hard to decide, but I definitely have to say it'd be very difficult to justify buying the Omega. But then again, this is watch collecting. We don't really need to justify shit. It's a stupid decision to begin with, but it's fun. So a very interesting move by Rolex in terms of Rolex themselves not doing anything but using Tudor as a way to sort of put a bit of pressure and to, again, elevate that standard when it comes to those sort of medium tier watch brands. You know, Tudor was already pushing the limits by having proper in-house movements with great power reserves in that sub $5,000 price category, putting pressure on brands like Tag Heuer, Breitling, and Omega itself to make sure all of their stuff in that price range, or at least above it, was definitely in-house. And this is just another step, because they've got the ceramic going on, they've now got the nemesis certification going on. It'll be interesting to see what this does to the rest of that price tier, to see how they react and how they really compete, because Tudor still has going for it the fact that it has that association with Rolex. A lot of people who can't get into Rolex because of the ridiculousness of the market, they go into a Tudor because they know they're still getting great quality and it still has a little bit of that Rolex vibe to it. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this new release, and what do you think of the context of it being Rolex using Tudor as a way to put pressure on Omega? Do you think Omega should be worried? If so, what would you expect them to do in the future sort of in reaction to this? Would you want them to see maybe a new certification, start playing around with even more different materials, introduce something perhaps in that 200 meter range that can be sort of a sub Seamaster 300 diver to maybe put some pressure back on the Black Bay? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches as seen throughout this and all my other videos, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.